and welcome. My name is Darla Saunders, and on behalf of the Atlantic Salmon Conservation Foundation and the Canadian Rivers Institute, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar. This series is made possible in part thanks to the contributions of the Government of Canada. For today's webinar, we're very lucky to be hosting Dr. Normand Bergeron. He is a professor at INRS and scientific director of CIRSA, Centre Universitaire de Recherche sur le Saumon Atlantique. His training is in physical geography, more specifically in fluvial geomorphology, but he developed over the past 15 years a strong interest for fish habitat issues, including the remote mapping of aquatic habitat at riverscape scale, habitat fragmentation by obstacles to fish movement and migration, and the effects of habitat on connectivity on fish production. After the presentation, we'll open the floor for a question and answer session. You'll have the option of asking questions directly using your microphone, or you can type them in and we'll read them aloud. I will now turn the webinar over to Normand.
Well, thank you, Darla, for this nice introduction, and thanks, Michelle, for offering the possibility of talking a little bit more, well, Michelle and Darla, talking about this water temperature monitoring network that we're working on, and we've been working on in the past year and a half or so. I must admit, this feels a little bit strange to be speaking to my screen. I like to have an audience in front of me, and as a spectator, I like to see the person that is presenting. So I know that it's not going to be possible for me to see all of you, and hopefully you're numerous in your room. But I thought I would just show you a picture of me currently sitting at my desk and giving that presentation to you. Gives you some feedback of the environment quite messy that I'm working on, that my students and colleagues will recognize. But that picture doesn't give you much of an idea of what I look like, so I thought I would add this little picture that was taken about 30 seconds ago by one of my grad students. I don't look very happy on it, but believe me that I'm enthusiastic about talking to you about this project. So now that you see a little bit, or you know a little bit more the environment I'm working on, I'll try to give you a brief summary of the idea that we had a couple of colleagues and I a couple of years ago about putting together a water temperature monitoring network for Atlantic salmon rivers. The first question that you may come to your mind is why would we need such a network for Atlantic salmon? Well, the first reason that I put up here is it's because of the nature of the beast. Atlantic salmon is a fish, and fish are ectotherms, which means that they cannot regulate their own body temperature. So their body is pretty much at the same temperature as the environment they're evolving in. So if there's water becomes cold, they're cold. If the water warms up, then their body warms up. And this has a lot of consequences on their ability to feed and to survive eventually if they're put into extremely warm temperatures. So that pretty much means that they're confined to water bodies that conform to their thermal niche. So there's a certain range of water temperature that is best for them, where that is optimal for the various functions that they have to accomplish. There's some temperature range that are not optimal, but that they can tolerate. But outside this these range of tolerance, then they'll have pretty much to move in order to find some cooler water, otherwise, or warmer water, depending on what side of the thermal niche we're looking at, in order to survive. So fish have, I'm not sure whether you actually see my my pointer. I'm going to use it anyway. The fish, especially Atlantic salmon in this case, I'm going to restrict the rest of the talk, talking specifically about Atlantic salmon. And we can see that they have their own optimal thermal habitat for growth. So the water temperature that they're evolving in will have an influence on their ability to feed and to grow. So we see that for Atlantic salmon par and smolts, this range is pretty much in between 16 and 20 degrees Celsius. If we look at a little bit down at the brook char, we'd see that this the optimal range is a little bit colder than the one for Atlantic salmon. So although they're classified as cold water species, they have a little bit tougher, their optimal range is a little bit higher than some of the other species. So keep in mind that so fish have a range of temperature that they're most comfortable with, and that influence the way they're going to feed and grow. Their water temperature also has an important impact or effect on the embryo development of the salmon. So when the salmon buries, female salmon buries the eggs underneath inside the substrate and cover it with substrate, the eggs will develop, and their rate of development is related to the accumulative degree days, so to the water temperature. So it needs to, in order for an egg to hatch, a certain sum of accumulated degree days has to be reached. So depending on how quickly or slowly this occurs, that will determine the hatching time. And of course, with the hatching time comes the length of the growth season. If a fish hatches earlier, it will have a longer growth season, and if it hatches too early, sometimes it can have a negative impact, because maybe that the food that they're feeding on is not going to be available. So there's also studies that suggest that embryo survival, so the survival of the eggs and survival at emergence, is optimal at a certain range of water temperature. So if the temperature, the incubating temperature goes above that range, then you'll start having or seeing a lower survival rate, as well as if the temperature gets below that range. So there's an optimal range for feeding, for growth. There's an optimal range for embryo development. It's also well known that the water temperature affects the adult reproductive migration. We know that they spend much more energy when they have to swim through warmer water, and that when they do have to swim or migrate through some warmer, very hot stream sections, this is a stressful experience and energy consuming experience. So we know that this may affect either their survival at the time, but also may affect their reproductive success, even if they survive through that stressful event. So hot temperature may also, of course, slow down upstream migration, where fish in warm water will tend to stay in the pools, in deep holding pools, and wait for some cooler water to migrate. So far we've been talking about some general effect of water temperature on salmon, how it can be optimal for growth, for feeding, and then we started talking about how some warmer temperature may affect the migration of, let's say, Atlantic salmon. But if water temperature gets too hot, it may and has frequently lethal consequences for fish. So we know that there's been quite a few studies showing that for eggs, alevins, and pars, there's a incipient lethal limit of the water temperature, and this incipient lethal limit basically says that there's a temperature above which, it's according to the design, the methodological design, roughly 50% of the fish cannot tolerate that temperature for more than 7 days. So they can tolerate for 7 days, but after that 7 day, they will not be able to survive indefinitely. So this is a first watch out temperature that we know that if the river temperature reaches that level, then fish will be able to cope for a while, but not for over an extensive period of time. There's also what has been defined as the ultimate lethal limit, which is basically the temperature that a fish cannot tolerate even for a short period of time. So if the fish is put in that water for, let's say, 10 minutes, it will die. And please take a look at the underneath the Salmo Salar header. We see the incipient here, incipient and ultimate lethal limit. And for the upper, which is basically the water temperature that gets too warm for a fish, which is the most common that we think may impact the fish, we see that these numbers are not that big. 22, 23, 24 degrees Celsius, and in the case of the ultimate lethal limit for parts small, 30 degrees. Well, there are many of our rivers, salmon rivers, where we witness temperatures that are very often above these thresholds. So we are basically becoming increasingly worried about the potential impact that these stressful events have on fish, especially in the climate warming context, where we see more and more of those warm spells occurring, and for longer time periods, basically. So no wonder that in this situation, in rivers that are prone to high water temperature, luckily enough, fish, both juveniles and adults, may cope with some extreme water temperature by using what we call cold water refuges. So I would say that for a juvenile fish, a cold water refuge, or for an adult fish, a cold water refuge is like some sort of an oasis in the middle of the desert. So the river, the main stem river, is really, really warm, and fish has a signal that indicates that he should find some cool water soon, and there are distributed along the river networks some local small-scale patches of cold water that are provided by influx of groundwater that is usually cool at the average annual air temperature of a given location. So it's basically in our areas constantly around 6, 7, 8 degrees Celsius, depending on where you are. So when there's a focal or localized input of groundwater in the channel, in the main stem, it creates a cool patch of water that fish can use to alleviate some the problems related to the warm temperature. So on the bottom right picture, you see an aerial view of a river that was where the picture was taken with a thermal infrared camera, and the darker patch of blue that you see, folks, the purple or blue is the water, the river water, and the darker patch is the cold water refuge at this location. And this is the kind of area that fish will use, and indeed there's been numerous observations, especially by the group at the CRI and UNB, led by Rick Konjak, Tomlin and Sari. So there are students like Cindy Bro and Nathan Wilbur and Alan Curry that have been working and observing that during warm temperature events, fish will congregate in these areas and use them until the water temperature, the main stem, cools down so that the fish can actually return to use the other areas of the river. So we know that these are very important features of the thermal escape of a river, and we suspect that they help sustain fish populations in some streams that otherwise would not be able to sustain salmon population because of the main stem temperature that becomes just too warm. So the key issue in relation with water temperature and adult salmon is the recreational fishing. We know that adult salmon, and the image that we have, the mental image, mental representation of adult salmon is that image of a very strong and vigorous fish. But although this is true for when fish are in cool or cold water temperature, they actually become very fragile in warmer water, to the extent that any manipulation of the fish may cause the fish to die. So catching a fish with a fly rod during a very warm temperature day is something that is very stressful for a fish, that requires a lot of energy expenses for the salmon, and may trigger that, or some lethal consequences. But also there's been studies showing that fish that were caught in release at temperatures not even that warm had a lower reproductive success than fish that were not. So there's more research to be done on that aspect of knowing exactly when some metrics that needs to be defined in order to better inform the decision-making process of when recreational fishing should be stopped and when can it be resumed. So I was asking, I said that the first reason why a water monitoring network is necessary, well, mainly the answer to that is because Atlantic salmon is very much dependent on river temperature. So if just in terms of being able to model the production of a river, it's very important to get accurate temperature data, and we'll see later on that they need to be distributed along the river network. So notwithstanding the potential impact of very stressful high temperature events, just knowing the exact temperature that the fish, the juveniles, for example, are evolving in is very important. Very important in order to be able to model the production and be able to predict what we can expect in terms of production from a river. It is also very important in order to identify rivers where coldwater refuges are essential for the survival of juveniles and adults. We know that many rivers don't have thermal events that are or warm events that are so high that they can cause harmful effect on fish. But we need to determine these. We need to know what are the rivers where there are frequent uh, high temperature events, because we know that for these rivers, cold water refuges are going to be absolutely essential to preserve and to protect in order to maintain the population, the salmon population on those rivers. And finally, it's necessary in order to better inform the decision-making process of halting recreational fishing during heat waves. Currently, there's some process that is being applied, but it relies on not much temperature information. So sometimes having one thermographs in one section of the river doesn't give us what the fish are experiencing in other parts of the rivers, and sometimes in other rivers nearby, because sometimes few thermographs are going to be used to basically get a picture of the temperature escape over a given region. So first reason why we need a monitoring network is because of the nature of the beast, because the fish is very sensitive to water temperature. This should be a 2 at why do we need another reason why we need a water temperature monitoring network. The second reason is because the dynamics of the water temperature in rivers is very complex. The temperature in rivers is controlled by complex interactions of atmospheric conditions, topography, riparian vegetation, stream discharge, stream bed, thermal influxes. So this intricate and complex set of interactions create water temperature patterns that are highly variable both in space and in time. So along a given river, the water temperature may vary quite a bit in space and in time. The general view of the water temperature pattern in rivers is that what we expect is to have gradual warming of the water temperature as we move downstream, due in part to the greater time for the atmospheric interaction to warm up the water temperature. So the general view is that there will be a slow tendency for water temperature to increase in the downstream direction. But this has come mainly from using few thermographs installed at a couple of locations along the main stem. So 2 or 3 thermographs used to depict the longitudinal pattern of water temperature over large basins that can be hundreds of kilometers or thousands of kilometers long. And what has been observed lately through spatially continuous observation of spatially continuous water temperature data is that the actual pattern of water temperature is much more complex than that. And these breakthrough were largely due to the increasing use of high-resolution airborne thermal infrared imagery that was able to provide spatially continuous water temperature data and able to identify very complex patterns of water temperature. This is the example for the Rivière Well in Quebec, and about an hour east of Quebec City. And the Rivière Well and one of its main tributaries, the Rivière La Grande. So what we can see on this figure is that there is like let's say for the Rivière Well, there is a general tendency for water temperature to increase in the downstream direction, but there are some local very complex variations in water temperature. And this is the same thing for the well river. So trying to say, well, that the one thermograph or two thermographs will provide the information that is required for us to model the temperature in river, it's difficult to think that only one thermograph or two will be able to do the job. So this kind of data showed that there is a lot of spatial variability on that figure here. You see this is the same information is on the bottom left figure, which is the one that I showed earlier. But the other figures are for different time period, where we see that the complexity of the long profile of water temperatures are changing very much throughout the season. There's not only a large spatial variation, but there's also a large temporal variation in water temperature. Here, just showing that this type of imagery is used to both extract long profile of water temperature. So here you can see that the way we would do it is with this series of continuous images of water temperature. We would extract some data points, and so that we're able to reconstruct the longitudinal profile. But they're also these images are also used to identify the Coldwater Refuges that are, as we said earlier, very important during high temperature events. So we can map the spatial distribution, the abundance of those thermal refuges, and also classify them, because there are different types that I won't go into the details of describing, but different types of thermal refuges. So here, just a close-up on some of the complexity, where we can see, let's say, for the middle figure here, that the river or the longitudinal profile of water temperature can be divided in cooling sectors, in cooling trends where the river tends to cool, and some other sections where the river tends to warm. So here you can see on this reach section that there's a warming trend, here a cooling trend, here a cooling trend also. So this helps us identify the geomorphological context that give rise to those cooling or warming sections in a river. So the second reason why a water monitoring network is necessary is basically because river water temperature patterns are complex, and they vary both in space and time. So we need to be able to set up an optimized network of thermographs that, in conjunction with some statistical models, will help us capture the complexity of the water temperature, and then so that the geostatistical models can be used to, in some ways, allow us to determine at all time the water temperature at all locations in the river, so that it can be used for our purpose. So first reason why we needed a water monitoring network, because basically the fish are highly sensitive. The salmon are very sensitive to water temperature. And the other second reason is that river water temperature is really complex, and we cannot just say we're going to put one thermograph somewhere in one river and assume that it's the same water temperature anywhere within the basin or anywhere within the adjacent basin. Basically, just adequating or making relating water temperature to air temperature is not a simple matter. So the third reason why we need temperature monitoring network is that the data, the necessary data, is just not there currently. We need to be able to determine the water temperature basically at all times anywhere in a river system, but we just don't have enough data to do it currently. Some data exists because there's been researchers interested in the water temperature in some governmental agencies. They collected some data, but it's never the location of these thermographs. Has never been part of a coordinated action that having for the objectives to be able to detect the complexity of the patterns of water temperature, and so that this data coming from the network of thermographs can be used then to model the water temperature. So we can see here some data exists on the Moisy River. Sometime I don't know, Hydro-Québec is planning a development somewhere, so we get some data there, or some years some ministries having money to monitor water temperature. So for 2 years we'll have lots of thermographs in Gaspésia, but then they'll be pulled out. So some data exists, and some of this data has been analyzed. So looking for some metrics that may for false salmon. So for example, another study that André Saint-Hilaire did, where looking at water temperatures in different river in Gaspésie, in Quebec actually, not only Gaspésie, and calculating some metrics. Here is the number of days where water temperature exceeded 23 degrees Celsius in July and August on those rivers, and also in pink is the number of days the water temperature exceeded 28 degrees Celsius. So there's some data, there's some analysis that has been completed. There's some drainage basins that have been extensively studied. We know that because of some network we know that are submitted, there's some to some very high water temperature events. There's been a concern, for example, on the Miramichi River in New Brunswick, on the Well River in Quebec, because those are two rivers where very high water temperature events are recorded almost annually. And also, like the Sainte Marguerite River, where because it's the river where this is in the Saguenay area, because the CIRSA has a research station there, then it got to be well covered in terms of water temperature. So there's some data exists, some analysis have been done, some drainage basin have been well covered, but the available water temperature information is not nearly complete enough for our purpose. So over the past a little bit more than a year, there's been a group of people working on the idea of developing a water temperature network for Canadian Atlantic salmon rivers. And just to brush up a little bit on the different steps that were made in the past, I was surprised to see it's only within the past year, because there was a workshop, an NSERC-funded workshop that was organized by André Saint-Hilaire from INRS in Quebec City. That occurred in January of last year, and there's a group of nearly 50 people that gathered in Quebec City. People that thought that we need more and better information, water temperature information for Atlantic salmon rivers. And after the 2 days of discussion, it was decided to formally attempt to develop the network. So that the meeting was to first and foremost to determine whether there was a need for that, and that was pretty much decided that there was indeed a need for such a network. And there was a steering committee that was formed in order to, with the task of first getting some additional funding to develop the network and to start the ball rolling and make sure that the idea would just not die after a few weeks. So rapidly we found some support. Some of the first support came from the Atlantic Salmon Conservation Fund, which funded us for a 3-year project. That was a proposal made by Alan Curry and myself, which secured some funding for 3 years so that we can start developing the network. And then NSERC Engage grant there was an NSERC Engage grant that was obtained by André Saint-Hilaire and Jonathan Carr from Atlantic Salmon Federation, which further gave us some funding, short-term funding to start developing the network. So the actions that were taken within that first year. First, there is the formation of a steering committee that is currently composed of André Saint-Hilaire from INRS, Alan Curry from the CRI and the Miramichi River, Danielle Casey, of course, of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada, Jonathan Carr from Atlantic Salmon Federation, David Leblanc from the Restigouche River, Annick Degg from INRS, and Rick Konjak, which is unofficially, he actually doesn't want to be a member, but he's still always there, so I guess we can just say that he's unofficially a member of the steering committee. So one of there was a meeting of the committee, and one of the first steps was to decide to hire a network coordinator. The person is Claudine Boyer, working at INRS, and she was in charge of basically organizing the field work that was conducted during the first year, to gather some of the information, the existing historical water temperature information, basically, and to prepare reports and slides. So one of the first idea that besides hiring a person that came up from the Quebec meeting was to start with the work with pilot projects in 2 watersheds. So we decided to work with the Restigouche people, represented by David Leblanc, which is always very keen on pursuing some or developing information and pursuing scientific research. And also we decided to use the Miramichi watershed because of its history of scientific studies and because of the crucial need to get more water temperature knowledge on that river. So the 2 pilot projects started within the first year, and it was also decided to start recuperating and consolidating all existing water temperature data in one database. So historical data that are available, either collected by researchers, by I'm trying to find OBNL's organism, ONG, or governmental agencies. So the idea is to try to collect as much of this information, historical information that is out there, that can be used in the modeling of the water temperature. So as part of the pilot projects, we bought some thermographs, and we developed a methodology, a common methodology for the installation of the thermographs on the pilot basin. So Claudine and some other people visited the representatives of the Miramichi and Restigouche. On the Restigouche, we had the help of Caroline Gillis and David Leblanc, and we developed the common methodology for the installation of those thermographs in the river. And as a result, on the Miramichi River, we added 33 new stations in the basin. The location of these stations was decided jointly with through discussions with local stream managers and people involved in the management of the river there. So either some stations that had been existing in the past but were no more in use, then we decided to put new install thermographs to continue the time series. But we also looked at trying to get a complete picture of the thermal scape within the river. So on the Miramichi River, 33 new stations were installed. On whoops, that was the Miramichi, and this should be the Restigouche on the header. There's a wrong hair there. On the Restigouche, 30 new stations were added on the river. So the idea is to do some geostatical modeling of water temperature within the river network, and this is basically going to be the work of statisticians like André Saint-Hilaire and Adik Deg. The idea is to find the way, a process whereby we can optimize the number of thermographs that are necessary in order to cover the variability of water temperature in a given watershed. So the idea is to start by putting lots of thermographs, and then by pulling statistically, during the analysis, pulling some of the thermographs out of the analysis and see how much information we lose if we take these thermographs out. So there's a complete line of research that is being done on the optimization of the network. So the second objective is so that there's the pilot project, and the second step was to start collecting and recuperating all potential, all historical water temperature data, and try to put that into one single database. So far, water temperature time series were obtained for 90 rivers in Quebec and New Brunswick. The number of years with data varies from one river to the other, but it varies from one season to 9 years. The integration of these time series is now being accomplished, and so that it's all put in one single database, and historical data will be added to the list as soon as we receive them from some other station. So another objective is to provide managers and stakeholders with annual water temperature report cards. So we have not finished that so far, because one of the key issue is to determine what will be the thermal indices, the thermal metrics that should be calculated and reported on those cards. And we've been pre-selecting some thermal indices, and but this will need to be further discussed with the steering committee and whoever is interested in giving its opinion on that, in order to determine what are the best possible metrics that we could give that will that a manager will be able to get a clear picture of the thermal scape of its river, and keep a temporal or historical perspective on how it is changing through time. So this is going to be very important information to observe as the potential warming events occur in the next few years. Yeah, so we're currently working on these thermal indices, and that's another area. People are welcome to give inputs, and we're planning to put a research proposal out so that we can work on what are the best thermal metrics to use. Currently, the network is composed of many of data sets coming from many agencies. We have contacted most of the agencies that potentially have water temperature data. Up to now, we have received the data from two provincial agencies for Quebec rivers, so the Centre d'expertise hydrique du Québec and the Ministère de la Forêt, de la Faune et des Parcs du Québec. We have some data from Atlantic rivers, from DFO for the Restigouche River. From Miriac, we got some real-time monitoring stations data on the Miramichi River, and INRS has in the past years developed extensive thermal information on some rivers, most specifically the Rivière-Ouelle and the Sainte Marguerite River. Of course, we're hoping to expand the network of our monitoring stations. We're currently in discussion with the CEN, which is the Centre d'études nordiques, Centre d'études nordiques, who is likely to give us a hand at installing and retrieving some thermographs in some very northern rivers at the northern range of the northern limit of the range of distributional range of Atlantic salmon, and also with the Labrador Institute. There's a strong possibilities that we'll be able to that they will be able to coordinate the installation and the deployment and retrieval of thermographs on Labrador rivers. So one of the reasons this talk, I decided to give this talk today, or I was offered to give the talk, but I think one of the objectives of the talk was to first inform the community that there was this project was going on, and that there's this idea that we'll be able to put an extensive network of water temperature stations. This is not an idea that comes out of nowhere. There is a group in on the West Coast, an American West Coast, led by Dan Isaac, that has been doing fantastic work at interconnecting existing water temperature information so that the number of stations that are now in and data points that are part of their network is just insane right now. But it just provides a very clear and inspiring goal for us to try to do something similar to what has been accomplished there. But to be realistic, money for monitoring is never easy to find, and there's no research agency that will fund such a network. There's no government agency that will, or ministry that will fund entirely that that network. So that the existence of the network relies pretty much on the network of people that will be able to collaborate and volunteer, offer some volunteer work in the network. It won't take that much. It's basically we need to identify some people actively involved in the many rivers where Atlantic salmon returns every year, so that those people finding that or purchasing the thermograph is probably something that we started doing and that we can probably keep doing. But what's expensive is having people moving or traveling everywhere across Eastern Canada to go and install and retrieve their thermographs. But if in every region of Canada, of Eastern Canada, some group of people volunteer to install a few thermographs and retrieve them once a year to get the data that is on, and then send this information to us to centralize information, then everything is possible. So the first way in which you can help the network is by offering some volunteer, some time that you can do for the network by installing and retrieving network thermographs, installing and retrieving thermographs, and also dig into your computer files, into your paper documents for some historical river temperature information that you have. Over the years, many people have been collecting sometime for a couple of years, sometime from one season, but those information are, this information is precious, and if you take the time to retrieve that information and communicate it to us, it will be greatly appreciated. So thanks very much to all participants so far in the network, because there's been a large group of people that I cannot start naming that have been working and helping us starting this network. Thanks to all future participants. So those of you maybe that are now aware of the project will be interested to join and help us. Of course, this will develop in time. In due time, we'll have a website, and so we'll have ways to communicate that information so that it can be used to everybody interested by or that requires some of this temperature information. And finally, thanks to all of you in front of your computers that I did not have the chance to see personally, but hopefully if we now that you sort of know my face, if we ever come across in a hallway somewhere, well, please stop me and tell me that you were there so that I can slowly start building up an image of the people that were attending to this webinar. So thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.